Okay, I'm going to start with this WordPress introduction, and this is going to be just a basic overview so that you can get a good understanding of WordPress and its processes. So what is WordPress? It's a publishing web content management system that's built on HTML, CSS, PHP scripting, JavaScript, and the MySQL database service. The PHP files with embedded HTML have scripts that interface with the users, the end users, web browser, and a MySQL database to query and retrieve data to dynamically build the pages from a variety of template component pages. What does that mean? It just means that basically you send a request to the pages that are in the file system, and the file system pages will have conditional scripting that have sets of instructions about how to query the database. It queries the database, it pulls the data, and then it can know exactly like what type of page to build from a variety of those different template components, so that it assembles it and it puts it back together, sends it back down to the browser. So let's talk about its components. It uses two main components. The first being sort of normal files, like PHP files, image files, HTML files, things like that. Things that are going to live just in the normal web serving directory in your file system. And then you're also going to have a database component. And a database is actually, technically it's a file that lives in your file system, but it's sort of a different kind of thing. It's not a normal kind of file. It's not something that you can just copy when it's a live database because you can damage it. It's actually something that is run by a service, and that is going to be a database service like MySQL or something. So we have normal files and then we have a database. Let's take a quick look. Okay, so here you can see separated sort of on the left and on the right we have something that looks like a file folder that's supposed to resemble the sort of normal file system, and then on the right we have a little database icon. Both of these are sitting on top of a server icon in the cloud. Now, I should also say that this is going to also be applicable to your local host environment if you have a local host server set up on your own personal computer. So in that case, if it was localhost, this wouldn't be a server, it would sort of be like a laptop or a desktop or something, but it's a computer. All right, so you have your file system that Apache web service is accessing, and then you also have your MySQL service that's going to be accessing the WordPress database. All right, so those are the two main components, files and database. So let's look at how some of these different processes are going to access files versus accessing a database. Typically, like if you're dealing with something in the cloud, the FTP service or file transfer protocol service is going to handle uploading files for installation and also downloading the files for backups. If you are on your local host computer, you're not going to have to use FTP. Obviously, you would be able to just move your files within your own computer. So the Apache web service also is going to be able to handle HTTP requests that come through the web to access and view these files that are on the web. And the files, as I said before, are going to have sets of instructions as to how to deal with the thing on the right, which is the database. So let's look at the database. MySQL is going to be the service that WordPress uses for its database. So MySQL service handles the database queries. WordPress files are going to interact with the WordPress database. MySQL can interface with PHPMyAdmin via the web. PHPMyAdmin, by the way, we'll talk about that later, but it's a web interface that is specifically built so that it can access the command line that MySQL service uses, so that you don't have to know the command line and access it through the command line, because that becomes a whole different level of dealing with this stuff. But PHPMyAdmin is actually quite easy to use, and it's something that's going to be an option on your localhost computer if you've used something like XAMPP or MAMP or one of those installations for your web service. And it's also, PHPMyAdmin is also consistently available through pretty much all web hosting providers, like Media Temple or GoDaddy or Bluehost or any of those, they're going to have a phpMyAdmin option that's free so that you can interface with your databases. And also phpMyAdmin can be used to back up your database. Backing up your database is separate from backing up your files. Those are two separate components. You need to remember your files are going to be your file system that's in the web serving directory, and then your database, even though it's a database running through a service, technically it is a file that you're going to back up so that you have it without backing up both the files and the database. This is really, really important to remember. You don't have a website with WordPress. You have to have both components, files and database, okay? So how does PHP work? Let's take an illustrated look at how, excuse me, not PHP, how does WordPress work? Let's take an illustrated look at how it works. So we have, you see here some different components. We have the original stuff we were looking at before. We have Apache, and then we have the MySQL service up on the server. And then in this diagram, we also have the end user's browser. All right. Now, like I said before, you could imagine if this was your local host environment, it's still applicable, except that, you could remove the cloud portion, and all three of these things would be in some way, shape, or form on that end user's computer. Okay. So let's look at the next step. So what's going to happen is the end user, that end user's browser, is going to make a request through web port 80 or 443. 80 is the normal web port, 443 is the secured layer. So it's going to make just a normal request up to that web website, and it's going to send it. And it's going to send that request, as I said, to Apache, which is going to access the files, in the folder. The second step is that the Apache service accesses the WP files for instructions, and Apache is going to then query MySQL's WordPress database for necessary data. Okay, so basically inside of those PHP files, the WordPress PHP files, it's going to have sets of instructions as to how to deal with any requests that come through, and then it's going to send those requests into the MySQL service to query the database. So then step 3 is MySQL retrieves that data that got requested, and then it returns it back to the Apache web service. And then finally, Apache assembles the templates together that it's supposed to be using based on the returned information from the database, and it returns HTML output to the browser. Okay, so basically it first gets the request. It says, okay, well, I need to see what all to put together. It goes and talks to MySQL. MySQL says, hey, this is the data you asked for. Comes back in step 3, and then in step 4, Apache says, oh, okay, I have all the data. I know what templates I need to put together now. It puts all the pieces of the puzzle together, and it gives you your end result back down in the browser. So where to get WordPress? You can get the WordPress starter base files from wordpress.org. There's going to be a download button. The downloadable folder that you find here, it's also going to have the installation scripts to make it simple to install. And we're going to talk about the installation process overview in a little bit. This is something that's really important that I want to make a note of, that I think it's important for you to understand though. WordPress.org is different than WordPress.com. WordPress.com is WordPress's hosted solution for their tool, where WordPress.org provides you the full installation files and support for you to place WordPress on your own server. All right, so if you go to WordPress.com, it's going to allow you to make a WordPress website or web page or whatever. You're going to log in, get an account, and they're going to host your stuff. But that's not what we're doing. We're going to be using the WordPress.org tools. Okay, so what will we be using? All right, WordPress.org. So where can I find support? WordPress has a terrific community support base and a wide range of documentation that'll help you understand more about how to use it, its functions and components and so forth. And it's codex.wordpress.org. All right, and you may have seen these things called single-click WordPress installations. Like if you already have your own web hosting, then you've probably seen these options to install a WordPress instance on your server. In fact, you might even already have used that option or explored it. And it kind of does stuff transparently in the background so that you don't see all of the steps that I'm going to show you how to do. What we're going to do is different. It's a different process, and it's so that you can see everything that really goes into a WordPress installation. And you know, there's more to why I think that it's actually really useful to do your own installation, aside from just knowing how to work with the components. I also think that I personally don't really like the way that those single-click installers work because it creates a weird database name for you and a weird username, and you don't really have a lot of choices sometimes depending on your hosting provider. And also the single click option, it's not something that's really as readily available to you for your local host environment. You could use something like Bitnami or one of those, but I want to show you something that you can do whether you have your own hosting solution in the cloud or whether you're using localhost or whether you're using our class server, which is also the cloud, but you don't have as many controls as if you were to have your own hosting. I'm going to show you how this process will work on any of those environments, and it seamlessly will be basically the same.